Through no fault of my own, I find myself with a bunch of go-kart frames in various states of disrepair. I think this one here is actually the closest to being functional, so let's work on that. Unfortunately, someone cut off the part of the frame that holds the front spindles on, so I need to remake that. These are the hubs that I got with this frame, and this one I guess is original, and it does fit on here, but this one doesn't fit at all. But I think if I flip it over like that, the back will be about the same, and then if I cut the front down a little bit and flip these studs over, it should work. Got that cut down and trued up on the lathe, and I cut that weld down just a little bit to make sure the wheel would fit over it. I messed up one of the bearings getting it out, so I just went and got some new sealed ball bearings from my local bearing supplier. I went ahead and just got two because they were cheap, and the other one seemed kind of flimsy, so I pressed one in, and then I made a little spacer out of a piece of pipe, put that in there, and welded it through this little hole, which was for the grease zerk that you don't need because these are sealed bearings anyway. And then I'll press the other bearing on top of it, and it should be good to go. We now have 4 functional wheels, so that's good. Steers and everything. I may need to make a block to keep it from steering too far and having the tire rub on the frame there, but I'll worry about that later. Got these little extension pieces for the frame welded on pretty solidly. Put a little piece of plate underneath to connect everything together because this tube is pretty thin, and it's super thin right here where the guy cut the old pieces off. So I just kind of did the best I could with that, but it should be solid with that plate underneath it. I went ahead and welded these pins in because there is 0 chance that I will ever need to take them apart. Exact same thing on this side. This hub is effectively a little bit wider, so that meant that there wasn't actually enough thread sticking out of the spindle bolt for the nylon in this lock nut to catch on, so I just put a little tack weld in it. So at this point, I am going to try to put an engine together for this thing. Alright, I've got the engine pretty well squared away, so now I'm working on a seat. For some reason this seat mounting tab is all bent up, so I'm just going to heat it up with a torch and beat it back flat, more or less. I've got these rails bolted to the go-kart frame, and then I've got these rails bolted to the seat. So I'm going to stick the seat in here like so, and weld it down as good as I can, and then unbolt the whole thing, weld it solid, and bolt it back in. And that way I know it'll fit. I've got a functional seat, and I made some pedals off camera. So now the only thing I need is a throttle cable, which I intend to make out of this brake line and this thin braided steel wire. I may need to hook a return spring to this. That is definitely a go-kart, so I'm gonna keep going and work on another one. I got another one of these brake assemblies and took this half off of it to replace the missing half here. This is just like a generic Chinese go-kart brake you can get anywhere. went ahead and reinforced the ends on this brake rod. This bearing is stuck on the spindle, so I'm just going to take it off the easy way here. The bearings in the front wheels were seized up solid with rust, so I put some new ones in there. I'm going to get the spindles cleaned up and pop these wheels on. I went ahead and got an engine mounted on this. It's exactly the same setup as the last go-kart, Predator 212 Honda clone, and Chinese Comet 30 series torque converter clone. The only difference is I may not be able to see it, but down there I had to cut away a little bit of the torque converter backing plate to clear the sprocket on the go-kart. Also did basically the same throttle cable setup. However, the steel cable I used on the last one had more friction than I was hoping it would, and it was kind of wanting to make the throttle hang up. So instead of that, I used this. It is a synthetic cord that is used for cutting out windshields. I just happened to have this from another project. It's super strong, 400-pound test. I guess it's kind of abrasion resistant, and that seems like it's going to work fine. Being that this is a two-seater, I didn't want to use mower seats. I wanted to keep a bench seat on it, so I bolted the seat frame down to the go-kart frame, and then I stole some plywood out of a dumpster at work and cut it out, put some nuts in it, and I'm going to bolt that down like so. I do intend to find some foam or something to cover this to give it some cushion, but that is a minor detail. Right now I actually want to ride it around some to see if I can break the bead on this tire to put a tube in it, because it doesn't hold air and the wheel is rusted onto the axle, so I can't get it off to break the bead the traditional way. I rode it around for a while and I couldn't get this tire to come off the bead, so I just let all the air out of this tire to match it, and I'm going to call that good. This thing needs, well, it needs everything, but the first thing I want to work on is the back axle. It's been flipped around. The brake disc is supposed to be over here and the sprocket's supposed to be over there. That's not a big deal. You can just unbolt it, drop it out, and flip it back around. But one thing I noticed is that the brake disc is warped quite badly for some reason. Not exactly sure what I'm going to do about that, but let me get the axle out and go from there. I was trying to figure out how to get this axle apart without destroying it, and I realized it's already destroyed. If I give it a spin here, hopefully you can see that the brake disc is not the only thing that's bent. The axle itself is bent pretty bad. So yeah, I'm just going to cut this axle apart and get a new one, or probably make a new one. Maybe not. Alright, I've got a piece of 1-inch diameter steel bar that I think I got from the scrapyard, and I'm going to see if I can cut a keyway into it. That was probably not the correct way to do that, but I think it's going to work. Definitely got a little bit off there. That takes care of the rear axle for now. I went ahead and put some wheels on the front end as well. I just used lawnmower wheels that had a 1 3/8 diameter center hole. I think that's going to work just fine. But one thing that I noticed when I was putting those on, this piece that holds the pedals and the steering shaft is like bent. It's kind of twisted this way a little bit, and that is causing the steering shaft to bind up so it doesn't spin freely. Unfortunately, it's all welded together and welded to the frame, so there isn't like anything you can unbolt to take it apart. So I'm just going to cut the shaft in half right about there, and then heat this bracket up with a torch and bend it to where the shafts line up just right, and then I'll make like a coupler for them and weld it back together. I flipped this thing over and cut out some sheet metal and welded it to the bottom of the frame to make a floor pan so that I don't run myself over with it. I also made a bracket to hold the brake caliper on. I just took a piece of angle iron and drilled some holes in it to bolt it onto the frame. And then this bracket comes with the brake caliper, so I welded that to the angle iron. And I made another bracket over here to hold this extra bearing to help support the axle in the middle, because I want to put a humongous engine on this cart, and I was worried that the extra torque might bend the axle. This is the engine I plan to use. It is a 420cc Honda clone. It's currently mounted on this pressure washer that some foolish person apparently ran without an unloader valve that's supposed to be mounted right here, and I believe that ruined the pump because it spins but it doesn't pump any water. So this is the original jack shaft plate that came with it. Of course, the bigger engine has a larger mounting pattern that doesn't match up with these holes, and I can't really just drill new holes through the plate and the frame because the engine and plate need to be able to slide back and forth to adjust the tension on the chain. So to make it work like it did originally, I would have to cut some new slots in, and that's way too difficult. So what I'm going to do instead to get around all that is just use this piece of steel. This is just some 3/8 inch thick steel plate that I cut out and drilled and tapped some holes in that match up with these holes. And then I'll be able to put studs up from below to hold the plate down to the frame, and then run studs down from above to hold the engine to the plate. Got that all put together, so you can see I've got the studs to bolt it to the frame on this side, and then the studs to bolt the engine down to the plate on this side. I'm using a 40 series torque converter, so the jack shaft isn't quite long enough. You can see it doesn't stick out past the pulley here, so I made a custom nut to go inside of it and grab the threads. I didn't do a very good job of it. It's a little off center, but it should work anyway. I rode this thing around for a few minutes and it started making a weird chuffing noise, and then it shut off and died and backfired really loud out of the exhaust. I messed with it a little bit trying to figure out what happened, and lo and behold, there is a big chunk of the head gasket missing out of the side of the cylinder there. It's not terribly difficult to change the head gasket on one of these, but I'm quite lazy, and also I don't have a head gasket sitting around. So I'm just going to replace the engine with this good running Honda 390, which will not blow up because it is a genuine Honda product. I rode this around a while. It needs a few minor things, but it does work. So now I'm working on this one. Okay, I skipped a little bit, got the engine bolted down, got a chain on it, hooked the throttle up. I wasn't exactly sure how the brake is supposed to go, so I made this bracket that clamps to the frame with a extra half of a locking collar there to hopefully support the other end. I think that'll work, and if it doesn't, I'll figure something else out. So now what I need to do is work on these hubs. Some of the studs are messed up, like that one, the threads are messed up on, and I think it's bent. And the threads are messed up on that one, and then I think there's one on the other one as well. So I'm going to grind these off from the back and then weld in some bolts to replace them. Got the back end pretty well situated, so now I'm going to turn my attention to the front end. I think all I need to do is put some wheels on it and take these tie rods off and straighten them, and also straighten these bent pedals. I got the front end put back together, got some wheels on it, so I'm going to go ahead and install the seat and take it for a ride. I do still have these 4 frames, but I don't really intend to do anything with them. I did mess with this green one a little bit, but I couldn't get this drive wheel off to change the tire on it, and I couldn't even like cut the axle apart like I did on that other one because the whole axle is encased in this metal tube. So I just kind of gave up on that one. These 2 here are all rusted up and missing a bunch of parts and stuff. And this one on the end is just kind of a basket case. Needs everything. I intend to just sell these as projects. I decided to replace the steel throttle cable on this go-kart with this synthetic stuff because it works so well. So you just get it started in there and then hook the other end of the tube to a shop vac with a glove stuffed in there to seal it up and turn it on. And it just feeds itself right in. I did a few other modifications to these. For the 2-seaters, I made bench seats out of pool noodles duct taped to pieces of plywood. That works great. And then on this red one, I put some skinny knobby tires on it and then ground the knobs off with an angle grinder to make them smooth. So hopefully we can drift it. I did put kill switches on all of them. That's important. And I'm sure I did a few other minor things, but my neighbor across the street is having a mini bike party and he invited me to bring these over. So that's what I'm gonna do. You see it? Need a water truck. That was a lot of fun. These all worked great. Everybody seemed to enjoy them. I certainly did. figured I would just give some afterthoughts for anybody that's still watching. Drum brakes worked a lot better than these disc brakes. For whatever reason, these disc brakes just don't create a lot of friction. You have to really mash on the pedal to get them to do very much. And they also like to stick on, which is really annoying. You can see where I put a big return spring on this one to try to get it to release consistently, but it still got stuck sometimes. These worked much better. You can lock the rear wheels up with minimal effort on the pedal, and of course they never stick on. You do need a brace here to keep the band from slipping off the drum. As long as you have that, you're good to go. You can see it's the same setup on this cart with the brace and everything. All these 212 Predator engines and 30 series Comet torque converter clones worked great, no complaints there. But this big block Honda and 40 series torque converter clone I thought was really disappointing actually. It's definitely got more torque than the smaller engines, but it doesn't really rev up any faster, so it doesn't accelerate any faster. And it's also quite a bit heavier, especially with that thick plate that I made to mount it with. And in addition to that, for whatever reason, this torque converter driver clutch wanted to stick really bad, like it wouldn't engage and disengage smoothly. There was even one point where I went around a turn and spun out and the torque converter jammed at full speed and stalled the engine. So I was just stuck there because I couldn't pull start it because it was trying to spin the wheels. So I had to go back to the house and get a hammer and tap on the driver clutch to get it to release, and the whole time I'm just stuck right in the middle of the busy part of the track. People are swerving around me trying not to crash into me. But yeah, I really did not feel like this one was worth the extra time and effort that it took. I think the drivetrain on this one is probably about twice as much as the smaller ones, and I honestly don't think there was any performance increase. But several other people there said it was a lot faster, so what do I know? And I may try to take this apart and polish it or something and see if I can get it working better. These two with the smooth tires were especially fun because you can drift them around turns, which probably sounds kind of stupid, but it really adds a certain level of skill because instead of just, you know, driving around and holding on, now you have to feather the throttle and the brakes and the steering and balance everything to try and keep yourself going as fast as possible without spinning out and losing control. And that just makes it a lot more fun in my opinion. I'd say it's definitely worth it to spend the extra money on these hubs that you need to bolt golf cart rims onto a go-kart axle. And another nice thing are these locking collars. I was having trouble with like the sprocket and brake drum and stuff walking side to side on the axle until I put those on, and that solved it. Those work really well. Suspension was another really nice thing to have. Not only was this cart more comfortable, but it also handled better because the front wheels stayed in contact with the ground better. And I'm sure rear suspension would be even nicer. My synthetic throttle cable setup seemed like it worked well, although it did get kind of frayed on some of them, especially this one. I think maybe flaring the end of the brake line would prevent that. But that is all I can think of to say about these things right now, so I hope this was entertaining, and thank you very much for watching.